Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, let us take a look into add request param annotation. Well, we use add request param annotation to extract query parameters from the request. Well, sometime client may send a request URL something like this, localhost 800/student/query, and then followed by the query parameters. So you can able to see here key value pair, first name Ramesh, last name Fatari. So this is basically called a query parameters in the URL. Next, look at here the code snippet. This is the REST API that handles this kind of request URLs, and basically the URL contains the query parameters like first name Ramesh, last name Padhatare. Next, this is the REST API that extract the query parameters value using add request param annotation. For example, here we use add request param annotation, and then we need to pass the query parameter name, that is first name, and then this add request param annotation will bind the value of this query parameter name to this post name method argument. Okay, next, here also we are using add request param annotation to bind the query parameter value to this last name method argument. So this is how we use add request param annotation to extract the query parameters from the request. Next, let us go ahead and let us see one more example to understand more about add request param annotation. So let's go to IntelliJ IDEA, and here let me quickly create a one REST API that demonstrates the usage of add request param annotation. So here public, and then response entity as a return type. So this is generic class. Let us pass book as a type, and let us give a method name as request param demo. Alright, and let us pass the method argument, let us say string title. So before that, let's have int id. Perfect. Next, within a method, let's have a system.out.println and just print this book id, and then let's have one more system.out.println and let us print the book title. Alright, next let us have a return statement. Before that, let's have a book object, book equal to new book, and then let us set the id, book dot set id, and then pass id. Next, book dot set title, and then pass title. And next, let us have a return statement over here, return response entity dot ok, and then pass book object in a body. Perfect. Next, let us annotate this method with add get mapping annotation, and then let us pass the URI /books/query. Okay. Next, let us say a client uses the URL something like http://localhost 8080/books API books, and then query, and then query parameter, let us say id equal to 1, and then ampersand, and then title equal to core Java. So let us say client uses this kind of URL to make the REST API call. Then we have to bind the value of these query parameters to the method arguments, right? So in order to do that, we use add request param annotation. For example, here let us use add request param annotation, and then we need to pass the query parameter name, that is id and title. So here let us use its name attribute, and let us pass id as a query parameter name. Similarly, go to title field, and here let us use add request param annotation, and then pass query parameter name, that is title. Alright, so this is how we use add request param annotation to extract the query parameters from the URL and bind the corresponding query parameter value to the method arguments. Alright, next let us go ahead and let us rerun our Spring Boot application, and let us see how this add request param annotation works. So from here I am going to stop and rerun the Spring Boot application. Well, our Spring Boot application is up and running. Next, let me copy this URL and let me go back to Postman as client over here, and here let me create a new request. Let us choose http get method, and then pass this URL in the URL section, and go ahead and click on send button. It says could not send request, so let me check what is the issue. So you can see the URL http and then colon and then slash slash and then localhost 8080/API/book/query, and then these are the query parameters. Next, click on send button, and there we go. You can able to see the response ID1 title core Java, and notice here we have passed book ID1 title core Java in a request URL, and that is what reflected in a response. Next, let's go back to our project in IntelliJ IDEA, and if you go to console, you can see the ID and title is printed in a console. Alright, it means add request param annotation is successfully extracted the query parameters from the request URL, and it bind the value of these query parameters to corresponding method arguments. Okay, so we can use multiple query parameters in the request URL like this: ID, title. Next, we can also use the description as well. For example, here description, and in order to bind the value of this description query parameter name, we use add request param annotation. For example, here let me first give the description core Java description, and next here let's use the corresponding method argument string description, and in order to bind the query parameter value to this method argument, we have to use add request param annotation, and then we need to pass the query parameter name, that is description. Next, here go to book object, and then before return statement just set the description to the book object. So here set description and then pass description. Perfect. Next, let us stop and rerun the Spring Boot application, and let's go to Postgres client, and here let us pass the description in a URL ampersand and then description equal to, let us say, core Java description, something like that. Next, go ahead and click on send button, and there we go. In a response, you can see book ID, title, description. Alright, so this is how we use add request param annotation to extract the query parameters from the request URL and bind the value of query parameters to the corresponding method arguments. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture.